Hello, my darlings, and welcome to Radio Wasteland. I am here with my sidekick. You can be my sidekick.
I'm a sidekick?
Today. It's Joe.
Yeah.
And my sidekick, Sean.
Sean, are you my sidekick, or are you the sidekick?
Is this a pyramid scheme? This is starting to feel like that.
Yeah, should I, I listened to...
Do I have to go recruit some sidekicks?
Yes.
In order to stay on the show?
Totally.
I listen to other shows on talk radio and on this station, and I constantly hear the hosts and stuff going like, "Oh, well, we should be embarrassed," and this, that, and the other thing. So I'm about to ask you guys: should I be using your last names when I introduce you?
Yeah, I mean, it's Smith. What does it matter?
And you're Brown, I assume.
Yeah, that's
Or
right. I just
Schmidt.
go by an initial. It's S on this show.
Well, whenever I hear it on these other shows, I always think like, whatever, man, you guys aren't that silly. But on this show, we actually are talking about things that could probably get you frowned upon in the public.
In the public domain? Yeah. Well, that is why we all wait till it's dark and sneak out of the radio station, right?
Right, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The hood over some sort of freaky mask.
Except for Jared and his white Celica that's parked in the back next to the red Ford. But, I mean, everybody else.
Yeah. But he's not really responsible. It's like the guy who drives the robbers to the bank. Are they really still...
Yeah.
Well, actually, yes, they are still a criminal.
Well, he's the only one
my God, I
paid to
agree
be
with
here,
you.
paid by somebody to show up.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
Yeah, that's true.
So for these past couple of weeks, at the risk of sounding poetic, I have not been able to shake this melancholy. I have been just very depressed for like 2 weeks.
Thank you, Wordsworth.
And I am already kind of a stoic, quiet guy, which is kind of weird that I would be on the radio. But unless I'm talking about a topic, I'm not really talking. And so I'm all the more so now. And my wife's all looking at me like, what the hell's wrong with you? And then on top of that, I have like the worst allergies that I have had in years. And so this leads me to a possible conspiracy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The Happening.
The Happening. I remember that.
I think The Happening is happening to me.
Well, that makes sense because I have the worst allergies ever this year. Matter of fact, this is my first year having real full-scale allergies.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's The Happening.
Yeah.
The trees have had enough with us.
Right.
All right. Joe, you missed last week's show.
Yeah, what was last week's show?
Cool.
Last week's show, we had a paranormal investigator,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Melissa Lockett.
Yeah, did you find out if we're going to be able to go investigate?
No, I think she's talking to her peeps.
How long do you have to talk to your peeps?
Well, I don't know. There's 6 of them.
Well, okay.
Yeah, we had.
They
our
have
people
lives
talk
and
to
day
their
jobs.
people and
Oh.
all that.
But, it was great. She was absolutely...
She made a lot of sense.
She did make a lot of sense. And, she, was able to dig into the topic enough to the point where it was interesting, but didn't have these sort of, like, set answers where it starts to go into the realm of, like, I don't know if I'm ready to believe that or not. You know, she was... And I don't know. I think she was definitely a great guest.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to listen to her and not believe in ghosts.
So,
And I already kind of do anyway, so it wasn't that much of a leap, but when she was talking, it's just like, oh, yeah, it's obvious. Come on, ghosts are real.
so all of a sudden I get the feeling like this is the crash after a really big coffee high, this show. Like that was the really big coffee high show, like the great show, and this is going to be the crash.
Yes, what we're trying to tell you, listeners, is that unlike that show...
No. Okay.
Chauncey, help us.
I'm going to throw it out there. So a couple weeks ago, we had the Battle of the Cryptids #1. We called it #1 because I was thinking about having more. And then the winner won, at which point I was thinking, well, I'm not going to have any more. And the winner was Mermaids. And tonight's show is going to be all about mermaids and if they're real or not. I was not happy about this when it first happened.
I remember you calling me a cheater.
I called you a cheater repeatedly.
Yeah, and I had nothing to do with it. Like, I'm shocked it was mermaids. I don't want to do a whole show on mermaids is what I was thinking. There's nothing to know, right? Yeah. But I was wrong. There is a lot to know about mermaids.
Agree. And just to put it out there, I was recreationally calling you a cheater. I don't really think you're a cheater.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Mothman was robbed.
I do know that my
I agree.
I do know that my daughter voted twice for Megalodon, so
yeah,
one could have cheated, but
so your family had my back,
right? Harley was a cheater,
yeah,
but I did not want this to win. I was going all out to try to keep it from winning. I was, hashtagging Mothman across Twitter, trying to get anybody to vote on it. And so then we got it, and, after a period of depression, I finally put my mind to it, and we really found, collectively, Joe, myself, and one of our unhearkened heroes here, Andrea.
That's right.
Really, we really found some good information.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
It is crazy. It's literally
big topic.
crazy.
It is crazy. There's a lot of real stuff going on
Yeah.
that leads to this thing of mermaids.
Yeah. And there's, along the way, one thing that I thought was really extra shocking was that there was a lot of stuff that, even if it didn't lead to mermaids, led away from how we thought that we evolved.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sort of cleared the slate, going like, well, why not mermaids? Because we know what we think is wrong.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about it. And this is not fringe science. We know
Yeah.
what we thought was wrong. And of course, we'll address that in our coming up segments about mermaids.
Are you ready for this, Sean?
I'm getting myself ready.
Are you?
My heart is beating pretty quickly. Right
Yeah.
Y'all
'cause
ready
this is gonna
for
be a
this?
good one.
Yeah.
That's not good. Yeah. I want to just, if you're listening, don't turn the dial, because this is going to be a really good show. This isn't about Ariel and little mermaids and naked women swimming around.
Yeah.
There's real creatures that are extinct just recently that are part of the mermaid story. There's ways we've evolved that are related to this story. This is an incredible story.
It really is. And I was
Shocked.
pleasantly surprised.
Me too. I was like, wow, cool. We have stuff to talk about.
All right. We're going to break. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. When we come back, it's all about mermaids.
Watches the ship.
Welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Our topic tonight is mermaids.
Of course.
The winner of our Battle of the Cryptids, you can thank our online community. If you have a problem with this, well, then you should have voted.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so let's explain what this is. We did a survey,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Online, and a lot of people voted.
Yeah.
And they knew they were voting for a winner that we would talk about for a whole show.
Right.
Yeah.
So they did this to themselves.
Because
did.
we had previously talked about each of the 6 cryptids.
That's right.
Right.
On one show.
Yeah, and there was this group of ladies who I think are obsessed with The Little Mermaid, who kept pushing this on us. And I told them that if anybody but Mermaids won, I would play the Little Mermaid soundtrack on the show.
Yeah.
So no Little Mermaid soundtrack, sorry. Right. That would have been our entire soundtrack for Mothman, I tried to tell you.
Yeah.
But no.
I mean, yeah, you got to put your foot down.
You
So.
do.
All right.
I got kids. I know that when you say it, you gotta mean it.
That's right, huh, son?
All right, so we're talking about mermaids. To me, mermaids initially was like,
Ariel, the Little Mermaid.
What
Yeah.
the heck,
Yeah.
It's like leprechauns, What?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Though I'm sure, if I've learned one thing on this show, it's that everything that you think is like cute and harmless and cartoonish, if you look up the original legends, it's like this small imp eats babies and then makes fondue out of them or something. I don't know.
Hans Christian Andersen, The Little Mermaid, is no different.
Exactly.
The Little Mermaid, she came onto land. She was rejected. She stabbed the guy through the heart and bathed in his blood, and then turned into sea foam.
As one does.
Wow.
Yeah. A much better story originally.
Yeah.
The idea of folklore having anything at all to do with children's stories is pretty new.
Yeah.
Last couple hundred years maybe.
Disney.
So
Disney went
yeah,
and turned them all.
Disney was the big one.
Yeah.
But before that, it was just supernatural thrillers basically.
Is it liable to call to action to burn Disney to the ground because of the ruining that it's done to all of my
Great
beloved
stories.
great stories?
Yeah, probably. Probably it is.
Right.
There's crazy
That's
stories.
why we didn't do that just there.
Right. So in this segment, we want to talk about some of. In this show, we want to cover some facts, some science, but right now we want to talk about some stories that are out there, right?
Why throughout history have people believed in mermaids?
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Is kind of what we're addressing here. And
it's very old, isn't it?
It is very old. The oldest thing I could find was about 4,000 years ago, and it was the Babylonian god of the sea.
Right.
And it really doesn't get much older than Babylonian, maybe Sumer. But
No, you could go back another 1,000 maybe, but I mean, the
Right.
records are so patchy from then. They probably did have some kind of fish god, and we
Right.
just don't know about it.
and this was a merman,
Right.
and his name was E-A. I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Oh, yeah. Isn't that like
Ea?
the supreme god in their pantheon?
Well, oddly enough, he was the god of fertility and food, and then cleaning.
Of course.
Which is weird because I think of Babylonians and I do not think of clean as being the first thing that pops to mind, seeing how, everything was made out of dirt.
Right.
What do you want?
You still got to clean, especially if it's made out of
Right.
dirt.
Are there any Babylonians out there that are going to be
Somehow you've made Babylonians mad. Yeah. Right. So there is the stories that go all back then. There's stories that are as soon as Christopher Columbus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
There's even a story,
Ancient Celtic myths are pretty...
interestingly, in
freaky.
Scotland.
Yeah.
There's a story, and someone who's just recently passed away remembers the funeral for a mermaid that was the size of a child that they found while in the sea. They were cleaning stuff and getting kelp and all that, and they found a mermaid tangled up. And they kept her and took care of her and ended up burying her. And the whole town was there for the burying of this little mermaid.
Huh.
Yeah, that was 70 years ago.
70.
And the whole
70.
town
That's
still
interesting.
talks about it. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, we need some corpses,
Yeah.
Well, it's like,
Mermaid corpses, not just in general.
Right. Yeah, I have plenty of those. But,
We're good. Stop sending corpses.
We've got enough.
We're good.
a lot of these cryptid hunters, they really kind of are out to get a corpse nowadays. But you had said I have another one that's in 1430 in the Netherlands, after the dikes in the town broke away, some girls found a mermaid swimming around in their town that was in the muddy waters and dying, and they took her home and they dressed her in women's clothing and basically kept her whole life.
Yeah, she actually learned language, that one.
Right.
That story of that mermaid learned language and stuck around.
Right.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And so,
And that's a whole town that remembers that story. I mean, that's like woven into their history.
right. And so let's say it's not true.
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Right. And it's not like they had MTV, right? It's not like there was a Discovery Channel. So how are these stories that are so alike showing up in pockets of communities that aren't reading
Way
the same
across the world.
way across the world that aren't reading the same magazine, right?
Right.
I'm willing to bet that in Scotland there was no one who had some sandstone from Babylonia showing the god that's half fish, right?
Totally.
So how,
Yeah.
what was going on? How were these stories percolating up?
Well, to some extent, I mean, you can say, sure, they didn't have Babylonian stuff, but they did have, remnants of Greek stuff, which was based on the Babylonian stuff.
Right.
But even so, we are talking about a small town. And
Yeah.
that's what's strange, because generally you wouldn't, in that period of time, you wouldn't be talking about people who were classically educated for the most part.
Yeah.
Maybe the pastor
Right.
would know how to read and write and all
Right.
that stuff. But
Right.
The least
Yeah.
likely person in town to go off about
Mermaids. It would be the pastor.
Right.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Although in one of those stories, the mermaid converted and became a Catholic and learned to speak. There was a story of and I think it's the one you were talking about, where she was captured and kept and clothed and became a Catholic.
To be fair, in 1430, you didn't have much of a choice to convert.
That's probably true. That's probably
Even
true.
if you're a fish creature.
Yeah. So how is that? How does it show up? Really, because you're right. Education, reading, communicating. It wasn't what
Yeah.
everybody did, and yet these stories exist.
Yeah, that's an interesting story, because I was always also just thinking, sea mammals spotted by sailors at sea. That's a simple explanation, even among uneducated people all over the world. But when you're talking, we adopted a mermaid,
Yeah.
how do you think you adopted a mermaid?
Right.
Well, let's get to some names that we do know. John Smith, Pocahontas. Bring us back to Disney, I guess. Caught sight of one off of Newfoundland in 1614. And he said her long green hair imparted to her an original character that was by no means unattractive.
Yes. Isn't that a weird one? Because here's the weird thing, and that's what kind of freaked me out as I was learning these stories. If you took it out of mythology, it became generally known that most of the sailors of that time, Christopher Columbus and all them, they were seeing manatees. And it became known that they were confusing manatees. Even back then, that it became pretty quickly known that they were confusing this sea cow manatee thing. But then you have some of the stories like that where it's obviously not a manatee unless he has special
manatees are known for their
John
long
Smith's
green
just
tresses.
Yes.
right.
Well, Columbus had something quite different to say. In 1493, Columbus saw a mythical mermaid near the Dominican Republic, and he said the day before when the admiral was going to Rio del Oro, he saw 3 mermaids who came quite high out of the water, but were not as pretty as they are depicted, for somehow in the face they looked like men.
Oh, yeah.
So
They'd have
John
beards.
Smith and Christopher Columbus definitely have different preferences.
That might be all it is. That might be all it is. Okay, so one thing I want to make sure we're due. How long do we have in this segment?
I don't know, about 2 minutes.
I want to make
half.
sure that the listeners know that as we come back in the next segment, we're going to tie some very real stories, some very grand stories about mermaids and sirens and things like that to an animal that actually is what it's about. There's actually an animal that went extinct, and we're going to talk about that. And that animal is the reason that Homer wrote about the sirens, and that is the sirens that they're talking about. And it is the basis for a lot of the mermaid myth facts.
We're also going to address some real science as to maybe why there could be mermaids out there.
That's right.
We've got test tubes and lab coats. We're ready to go.
Test tubes and lab coats. You're listening to
Inspiriting.
Radio Wasteland. Welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Our topic tonight is mermaids. And we are going to address some of the science behind mermaidery.
Isn't it crazy there's science around this?
There's
Yes.
science around everything. It's just, the study of knowing things.
Yeah, I think that's why I like cryptids so much, because if you just kind of cut through the pop culture version of what they're talking about and study, there's science there. There's real things behind them.
Right.
It doesn't mean that there's a red-haired pretty little mermaid, but there are some factual things going on or scientific theories that exist that make a lot of sense that are related,
And one of those theories is the aquatic ape theory.
Yes.
For those of you that aren't familiar with the aquatic ape theory, that is the belief that when we were pre-humans, that we as primates spent some time in the shores and the waters before we eventually came back onto land. So it's not that we were in the deeps swimming around in this aquatic ape theory. It's that we were in the shallows, eating shellfish and living in there.
Right. So it's almost like it's the missing link. So the theory is, here's some questions. Let's back up and let's do a couple questions. So if we were to think about mammals, can you name any mammals that are hairless that either they're somewhere in their lineage they were aquatic, or they spend a lot of time in the water now, like hippos or seals like that are naked, that have no hair?
Right.
Naked mole rat.
Yeah, that's the only one.
The mole rat is the only one, but it actually never comes above the ground.
The only one that does not have an aquatic ancestor.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so all of a sudden you start going, okay.
Well,
so,
and also us, if you discount the aquatic ape theory.
Right.
sure. And maybe
But
that's
even
true.
a rhino.
Yeah.
Even a rhino
Yeah.
has an aquatic ancestor.
Yeah. Now,
That's pretty interesting.
I'm going to bring in the Christian group here
Okay.
because as a Christian, well, that makes sense because we were created by God as our own little individual thing, and there's no evolution in our lineage. Doesn't mean things didn't evolve, but as a Christian. So, but putting that aside, let's say that there is evolution in man's path. Why wouldn't the aquatic ape make sense?
You know, the theory was originally proposed by Alistair Hardy, but Elaine Morgan, an author, she really brought up a lot of this stuff. And what she did in order to answer your question was she came up with all of the big leaps between man and other primates and, you know, all the major differences. And they were all easily explained by the aquatic ape theory.
Right.
It's interesting.
You know, and it was the word pictures or when she describes humans walking around as they're, you know, chest deep, waist deep in water, wading in water, trying to walk around versus a gorilla or a monkey moving on the savannah. It gets a lot easier to see how that aquatic ape started to stand upright because they're being supported by water, right?
Right.
And they're having to stand upright in order to move
hunch in
around.
water because
They can't
drown.
Right.
Well, we'll deal with the first one. The first one is, why do we walk upright?
Right.
And so the general belief up until now has been that the reason why we walk upright is because the jungle started to die back, the savannas took over. Savannas are tall grasses. And we had to come out of the trees and try to forage for food by going out into the savannas. And in order to be safe, we had to learn to stand
Like
on
meerkats.
our hind legs, like meerkats, to look over to see if there's some sort of critter that wants to eat us.
Yeah.
Now, she had not only did she have the good argument that most apes and primates are able to stand, but don't very often, but all of them will stand when in the water.
Right.
But she also, through the fossil record, we have the pollen from plants at the time, and we know that man, or man's ancestors, primates, came out of the trees prior to the savannah.
Yeah, they weren't even in savannah.
Right. And
Yeah.
so regardless, whether there are aquatic apes, we need to rethink exactly why we came out of the trees.
Yeah, because the savannah story
And where we went.
literally doesn't work and hasn't worked in science for a long time. But since science won't agree on something, they just leave it in the story.
I think that's the
Yeah.
case a lot of the time.
I think so,
that
too.
is.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, the textbooks stick around generally.
Yeah.
And you'll have people who learned it one way and it's not their discipline, and then they become a professor, but their discipline is, you know,
Right.
something slightly different, and then they're teaching the simplified version that they learned.
Yeah.
That is since overturned. 'cause-
Right.
We'll have to do a show on Egyptology because that's one of those places where those who know are holding on real tight, and there's a lot of holes in those theories.
That happens.
So the aquatic ape standing upright in the water. Another one of her arguments was that, well, actually they were Alex Hardy's arguments. Was that they lived in the shallows and they ate shellfish and fish,
Which,
has all the nutrients that we ended up needing and that promote massive, massive brain growth. Because one of the things that makes us different is our brains are massive
yeah, and well developed.
and
Right.
well developed.
And well developed.
But for our body size and everything, they are massive. And so, like you see a horse, you know, here the horse is giving birth within minutes. The horse is up and walking and doing its thing, right? And then a human gives birth, and that baby needs to be taken care of for a
For like
year.
18 years.
Right? Yeah, totally. Ouch. You know, and the reason why we take so long to physically develop is because our brains are so.
Right.
You know, our brains take so long to develop.
You know, another thing she brought up was start looking at the mammals that exist that can control their own breath.
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting one.
To me,
as
that was
well.
a big one.
That was a big one.
Yeah, and they're all aquatic.
Yeah.
Or if they're not aquatic by what we think of whale or seals, they spend a lot of time in the water, like otters or hippos or things like that. That they control their own breath.
Hey, Jared, do you think you could pull up, see if you can find scientists created a computer program that mimicked the way they think chimps would sound if they were able to talk? So what she said was that Right. Only other sea animals, including birds, had the ability to control their
breath.
Their breath.
To dive.
Right. And that other apes and primates don't have the ability to talk because they can't do these things. And then here we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
After hearing you lay it all out, I'm kind of in the it's possible mode, actually. I mean, and when I looked this up earlier, what's interesting is I expected to read the Aquatic Ape theory, which had its own page, and then go down to criticisms and find out that everyone says this is nonsense for reasons X, Y, and Z. What I found instead was it's possible.
Yeah. To me, this isn't, we're not talking about crackpot science, you know.
If we're talking about there's still green-haired ladies swimming around,
yeah,
that's where it gets iffy.
well. Here's the other. Here's the stickler. Right.
Okay.
Is that primates go into the water. There's our primates hanging out in the water. They're eating their shellfish. They're getting along, making primate babies, doing their thing. Life finds a way. And just because most of them came back this way
Could some of
does
them
not
kept going
mean
the-
that some of them didn't go out that way.
right.
Because we know that there are mammals out there living and breathing, and they go down pretty deep.
And they used to be on the land. We still see in whales and dolphins their old leg bones.
Vestigial bones,
Yeah.
yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. Are you really going to have them play that?
I don't know. Did you find it, Jared? All right. Let's hear it. You didn't find it. That's all right. My wife is very happy that you didn't. There it is.
Okay, play it.
Oh, gosh.
Will you marry me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, don't play it again. Thank you.
Yeah, my wife is absolutely, totally disturbed by that. And every once in a while, I'll be all, "Will you marry me?" to
Oh,
her. And
my
she's all,
goodness.
"Don't do that." You can't unhear that once you've heard it.
That was creepier than the last segment of our last show, which was about, like, freaking demons possessing people and ghosts and stuff.
So, if you believe that aquatic apes are possible, then you have to believe that it's possible.
That their branch kept going and became
Kept going out there.
and became an aquatic living ape.
But there's
Right.
a sticking point here, which is, where are they? We have these sightings that we just talked about, but, you know, that's in the realm of 3 or 4 sightings. That's, you know, that's what you'd expect from something that was not necessarily existent.
You know, my argument to that, I think, is an obvious one that's all the time. But frankly, the ocean's huge, and we're still
Sure.
finding new sharks. There's whales that we know exist.
Where's
We've never
Malaysian Flight 476?
Yeah,
or
there's
whatever, you
right.
know?
But what's interesting,
But those kind of look like other things.
But I
Those
got a
could be
cryptid.
confused.
I've got a cryptid for you in a small little island in Tasmania called the
Okay.
Tasmanian tiger that for years was thought to be extinct. And for the first time ever, the park rangers believe they have credible spottings of actual Tasmanian tigers back. So here's this small little island that for 50, 60, 70 years, they've been trying to find these Tasmanian tigers that they can't find. And now they think they have credible sightings that they will exist. So how
They
could
just missed them?
On an island.
on an island?
They were hiding in the bushes?
Yeah. So how could,
Okay.
a mermaid could certainly hide in the ocean. Now I'm not saying they're there, but I'm saying you could. It's plausible.
That's a good argument.
All right, and we'll pick up this argument after the break. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. We are talking about mermaids and the aquatic ape theory. And I think all of us are being somewhat pulled around to something that, 2/3 of us were a little apprehensive as
Yeah, that's true.
as a topic.
Wait a minute. That means, right. So I want to pull this next one around
Yeah.
to a true living sea creature that I think got lost in translation. So we've all heard of the sirens, right? The sirens in Homer's, whatever you call it,
The Odyssey.
the Odyssey,
Yes.
where and we've seen it in every movie out there where there's these pretty sea creatures that sing and talk you into your death on the rocks, right?
Wooing people to the rocks.
Yeah, and actually in the Odyssey, there was 2 different sea captains who handled this attraction of these creatures in 2 entirely different ways. One actually had him tied to his ship where he couldn't move or say anything so that he could make it through without telling him to turn towards the rocks and ruin the ship, right? Mm-hmm. The other guy ends up having a beautiful choir and musicians sing to him so he can't hear the sirens, right? And so you lose in translation that there was an actual creature called a siren. And there's actually a whole series of creatures called sirens. And they happen to live still today. There is one of the species that's dead and just died, 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, something like that. And seafarers considered them very bad luck because they were close to shore. So you tended to run aground if you saw these creatures called sirens. And do you know what they are? Manatees. They're manatees and dugongs. But now here's the incredible thing. There was a captain called Stellar who found a small group of these things up near the up by Canada and Russia and up in that area in the islands. There was only one island they were found on. They were manatee-like dugongs. There was only 2,000 of them in total of the population that was found. This was back in 1741. They were 30 foot long. So if you can picture a manatee,
that's like whale shark sized.
That was whale shark size. So if you can picture
also
manatee,
known as whale sized.
20 manatees. It would take 20 manatees to make this 30 foot long sea creature.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was called a siren.
And why?
Well, I don't know why they're called sirens, to be honest with you.
Well, did it make some noises?
Apparently it made a little bit of noise if you cornered them or captured them or whatever. But I don't actually know where the original name came from, but it's stuck with this the science called this group of creatures sirens for as long back as we've been studying this group of creatures.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's hard to believe that there is some scientific facts somewhere back there with the sirens, and we do know that whale calls and there's a lot of vocal singy things in the sea that I mean.
Yeah, and I also think it's not a far leap to go. Where you turn a myth, where you make something normal, you just got to go 5 degrees to the right and make it a myth. Right. And that's how I picture this one. Like, this one became very much more real than I thought I was going to find. The reality is that you can imagine just generation after generation after generation of fathers and captains and fathers telling their sons who are about to go on the ship, if you see the sirens, turn the boat back, right? Because you've gone into shore. And remember, they didn't have radar. Right. So there were things you had to look for to know if you were about ready to run aground. And that translation might not have been any more than that. And now you're a kid on a ship and you're thinking, well, what am I going to see? Do they pull us in? Do they trick us? Do they lead us aground? What is it about these sirens?
You think it's like the boogeyman of the sea? Yar, if you see the sirens, you must pull back.
Well, you could see we're lost in translation.
Show pirate theme.
Yeah.
Based on that voice alone.
He tried to.
I just had this
He tried to.
realization. But wait, because we're talking about, mermaid sightings are these, manatee creatures. Now, just one segment ago, we were talking about, no, they're humans who evolved in this other direction and became fish people.
Well, I think we're talking about 2 different things.
Okay.
So there is the aquatic ape theory, which I think we wanted to make sure we covered.
Yeah.
But then I also wanted to cover a very real creature called a siren that you can see how that has become part of the mythology to sailors to avoid the dangerous zones. And it probably wouldn't take long for some creative mind to turn that into something else that's leading you towards the rocks, And
also the fact that there are cryptids in the sea. Sean?
That's true. Well, I guess what I'm just wondering is, where are we at with this in terms of believing in mermaids? Are we, they're sea mammals? Do we have a consensus as...
Do we got yays or nays? Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Well, so I wanted to do research and find out there was some Pretty Little Mermaid. Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just assume. I mean, frankly, if the
Her name
mermaid.
is Estelle. She's very nice.
Yeah.
Right. If she existed now, I have a feeling, based on the aquatic ape theory, that she is not cute.
No.
No.
Well, but you never know, right? There's all kinds.
Yeah, John Rolfe thought so.
Soldiers
Right.
get desperate.
Right.
Sailors get desperate. Whatever.
So for me, the Pretty Little Mermaid didn't pan out, but the fact that there are very real things that have very real creatures that were probably incredibly different and massive. Like, imagine seeing a 30-foot long, half fish-looking mammal. I mean, you would almost think that was a god, right? So, I mean, because there was nothing else 30 foot long out in that water at that time, other than whales.
And your dead super manatee,
Which is what I'm talking about. It's called the stellar sea cow.
it might still be around. There are a lot of sightings from, as a lot of people know, the Japanese still do whaling, even though they're not supposed to. And there have been a lot of sightings from Japan of gigantic humanoid creatures living in the icy waters of the Antarctic and the Arctic.
Yeah, and when I hear that, my son's here says he just texted me the same exact thing. When I hear about those stories of what are they called, the Negans, which means man or human,
Right.
and they're describing 20 and 30 foot long human-like, fish-like creatures. That's exactly how
sounds exactly like
Stellar
a sea cow.
is describing the same very northern, huge, massive manatee-like creature that even as long, so they're supposedly went extinct, but even 30, 40 years ago, they have real sightings of them where they found a few and then they kind of disappeared, never found them again. So it's very likely those things are existing out there, and they're the story. I mean, if you were going to talk about a Greek god, and you bumped into a 30-foot long thing with front arms and a flippers,
Oh, yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. I'd be like, I found it. There it is.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's just all looking at you going, as you're trying to make sacrifices.
Right. It's like, I just want kelp.
Yeah.
And they have beards. Isn't that funny how they're described as coming out and looking like men? They have beards.
I have a beard.
Yes, and I was
Yeah.
thinking as you see the drawing.
I'm a little
We're on to you, Sean.
Yeah.
We know your secret.
All right. Well, this has been Radio Wasteland, and we have been talking mermaids. You know, this show, I thought it was going to be shady, but I think we came up with mermaids, probably a no. Aquatic Ape, I think, is on the fence.
Aquatic Ape on the fence. Mermaid,
Sea
no.
cows. Yeah.
All right. But if you're a firm believer in the sea cow.
What's
Well,
true?
Yeah, the real things.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
I also don't believe in goldfish.
All right.
course
You've
not.
been listening to Radio Wasteland. Check us out online and tell us what you think of mermaids.
1, 2, 3, 4.